A very good evening to one and all present here today. I'm Aishwarya Manipati from Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, your host for today. As you know, Cybersecurity Center of Excellence is a local hub in Telangana um, for entrepreneurship, innovation, and capability building in cybersecurity and privacy. And we are committed to create a safe and secure and trusted cyberspace. And in this endeavor, we kickstarted a series of webinars to bring you the latest tech trends and in cybersecurity space. Last week, we had Analyzable and who's a CCoE Incubated startups. Uh, we discussed about OT and IoT security. And today we have CSCC Labs with us, which is one of our CCoE incubated startup. And we are here to discuss about zero trust implementation at core. So before we begin, I would like to introduce a little bit about CSCC Labs. They provide integrated cybersecurity services and solutions. And we have Mr. Chandra Reddy, who is the CEO and founder of CSCC Labs with 20 years of experience in the industry and uh, and and with a strong background. And we also have Mr. Naveen Arigala from his team, who's the Vice President for Consulting, with a strong background in compliance, forensics, and consulting. So we welcome you, sir, and thank you for taking time out to discuss with us today on the Zero Trust implementation at Go. And to keep the session interactive, we request all our participants to feel free to ask questions in the chat window below, and we'll be taking them at the end of the session today. So without further ado, I would hand over the session to Mr. Chandra. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Aishwarya, for that introduction. And so my name is Chandra, and we run a cybersecurity startup called CSCC Labs. So this is our fourth cybersecurity startup, and so what we understood in last couple of years in this entrepreneur journey is obviously cybersecurity is a very huge space, really, and a lot of problems are there. Doesn't matter how big is the market and how much technologies are getting evolved for last 2+ decades. Still, organizations and companies and many business verticals are continuously get hit by a lot of cyber attacks. So we keep seeing it. If you guys go to the hackernews.com or any other newspaper, you keep seeing at least 1 or 2 major attacks every week. Even the big organizations are going through this kind of attacks. So what we are planning to cover in this next maybe 30 to 40 minute session is what is the existing ways, what are the existing ways how organizations are securing their critical infrastructure and especially the data, and what are the different type of attacks are there and how they're actually coming up and why they are so difficult to get caught by a traditional security solutions out there in the market. And then we will talk about what is exactly the zero trust implementation at core and how an organization needs to think differently from the perspective of defense in depth, what we have so far, and how the zero trust implementation is going to really change and actually put their organization into much more secure environment. So what I will do is I will ask my colleague Naveen to start the session by explaining about a couple of things from the OS and IT and different attacks and compliance and traditional methodology what we need to follow through SDLC process. So he will cover some of the zero trust implementation in a different way, and then I'll come back and talk about a few minutes on which are the areas we need to implement this, and I will probably show 1 or 2 slides which areas we need to consider, and then 1 or 2 demos. So that's how then we will be obviously taking questions if any. With that, I would like to invite Naveen to take over the session, and then I'll come back once he is done. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra. So let me share my screen.
Yes, Naveen, we can share. We can see your slides. Yes, perfect. You can go on. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Chandra, for the brief update, and thanks for inviting me to this call. So in today's session, I would give a brief update about Darkweb. In the previous session, if you remember, Venu has provided a very brief update about vulnerabilities and how they are going to exploit it and what needs to be done for those vulnerabilities. So from that perspective, I mean, the previous session, Venu has given a very good update. In continuation to that, this is a different perspective to understand how a vulnerability is getting evolved, and in a different perspective, how the low-hanging fruits are being breached by those vulnerabilities. Okay, so to start with, okay, the agenda is will be briefly understand what is deep web, what is dark web, and what is the purpose of using Tor browser and Tor network, and how a threat actor is getting created, and what is the impact on the online data, and how a vulnerability is evolved, and what are the layers of security and security controls and assessments. Okay. Okay. First thing, deep web. So there are certain levels of deep web. Usually, the first layer, the level 1, is a surface web, in which the usual browsing will happen. Usually, the World Wide Web content that is not part of the surface web and is indexed by search engines. For example, usually the people search with for web pages regarding private user accounts and some private info which is available in the internet. Okay, and the speculation is it has around 10 petabytes of data, which are around it has nearly 5 lakh websites, and nearly 14,000 to 20,000 deep websites are available in this deep web. And the estimation is it has around 99% of web content which is hidden, which is not visible in the surface web. Okay, and usually the www content it is not indexed by the standard search engines. So the content of the web in deep web is hidden behind the web forms, that is HTML forms. So most content that is not readily accessible, readily easily accessible using the standard means of the search engines like Google, Bing, or whatever. Okay, so what is the surface web? What does it contain? So the web that has the vast majority of internet users. Okay, so usually the surface web can be reachable by a number of users, and it is accessible in any nation that does not have any restrictions. For example, if you look at China or Egypt, they have restrictions, but the surface web can be easily accessible. Okay, and usually through surface web, people will access Facebook, information websites, Wikipedia, general website, etc. And the next one, the Bergy web. Usually, some of the results will be locked by search engines like Google and Bing, and those locked results can be accessible in the Bergy web. And it has some contents like pirated media, pornography, etc. Okay, and the deep web, it cannot be accessed easily, and it requires a third-party tool called Tor or a proxy to access it. One or two proxies to access it. So it contains most of the archived web pages. For example, if I want to see a content of a web page which was created long back, nearly 10 to 12 years, and even if the domain is not renewed, even that content can be seen in this deep web. Okay, and the next one is charter web. It is very hard to get into this layer, this web, and it has more illegal content, Usually it has advanced government researches and some kind of confidential information. And most of the internet black market, such like which runs some bitcoins, usually in this layer it will happen, like bounty hunters or illegal game hunting, etc. Okay, and the next one is Marina's Web. It was named after a Spanish technician, and it is understood as per Google, he is the one who has created it, and it is the lowest known level of deep web. And it is extremely difficult to access. And usually, if you remember, Julian Assange and other top level WikiLeaks members believed to have access to this one. Okay, and level 6, 7, 8, there is no stringent information available. And the rumor is there is a giant firewall which prevent people to going further. And usually there is a called Primark, and it is claimed to be controlled by extremely powerful AI engine. Okay, so this is the brief update about the deep web. Okay, so now what is dark web? As I said earlier, the third layer, I think so, it is a dark web, which usually have a content which cannot be accessed easily, and it requires a proxy, okay, to access the content. Okay, and it contains, as I said, it contains archived web pages and some research work of government, business, and it is accessible some hacker information or vulnerability information, or script kiddies, or some virus information, or something like illegal and obscene content. So that content can be accessible in dark web. This I already covered. Okay, so as I said, to access dark web, we need Tor. Tor is nothing but a type of a browser, and it has its own Tor network, where a series of machines would be connected to those Tor network and accessible only by Tor browser. Okay, so as I mentioned here, some of the hidden services which are provided by Tor are something like the hidden wiki. Usually, the content which is not available in the Wikipedia, it is available here. And by default, the search engine is DuckDuckGo. And for suppose if you need any sensitive information, if you want, as I said earlier, if you want to know a brief update about a 10 years back history, then you can use this Tor to retrieve that kind of information. That means in a ethical hacking process, the first step is enumeration process. So for that enumeration, there are free tools available, and using those free tools, we can easily get a brief information about our target. I mean, hacker target. So hackers or script kiddies or whatever the threat actors, they use Tor to gain some sensitive information or brief information about the target. Okay, and you might be thinking whether is it legal or illegal. Usually, the current laws which are available, they are vaguely applicable to the dark web. Okay, and usually in the deep web or in the dark web, both white hat hackers and as well as black hat hackers. I mean, even government agencies do have access, but they monitor it, and at the same time, even the skilled professionals or hackers, they also have access. So hacking is regulated by the Computer Misuse Act, and I think Computer Misuse Act is from UK, and Computer Fraud Abuse Act is from US. So this is regulated by these two acts, and it bans trespassing, unauthorized accessing, and damaging computers. And the dark web enabled hackers, it's a series of projects which they handle, and it enables hackers to purchase a malware, to correct a ransom, and even to buy a list of IP addresses or list of vulnerable IP addresses, vulnerable systems, and they can buy the virus information, how to exploit and everything. So all these illegal things can happen in this dark web. Okay, so I'll take a pause here. So let me know if you have any questions.
So is Tor the only browser?
Pardon?
Tor is the only browser through which you can access this, or there are other browsers?
It's the only browser.
So maybe you can mention about the precautions you need to take if somebody is installing Tor and then he wants to access the dark web.
Okay. Usually, I mean, it is not recommended to access Tor unless you know the depth of using this website, using this browser. Why? Because there are malicious actors. Why? Because it's a group of malicious actors where they form a group, they do projects, and they will try to attract people who are new to this Tor. For suppose if you click this one, you will gain something, or else if you try to download some hacking software, that hacking software itself will try to retrieve information about you. And the suggestion here is, if anyone wants to use this Tor, the suggestion here is your machine should be sanitized. I mean, sanitized in the sense it should be a hardened machine. Only a certain set of rules should be applicable. Okay, so that you can install Tor in that one, and since not all the features are not available in that particular sanitized machine, so obviously even though if it is breached or something happened, the impact will be less. Otherwise, on our personal machines, it's not recommended to install. I hope.
Yeah, Naveen, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So moving to the next, as I said, we have a series of threat actors. Okay. I think Gartner or someone, they have clearly mentioned there are 14 threat actors. I mean, 14 categories of hackers, starting from botnets to black hat. Maybe the categorization, we can treat them as from the skill based. We can treat them as low skill to the high skill, but it is not the legal skill level. Okay, but to some extent, the skill level is at the top. Okay, so the triangle represents a series of, the triangle represents the series of categories, criminal hackers, and on the right side, we can take it as data which is secured. And when I say data, the data could be belonging to any individual or an organization. So for suppose one is a level of data which has minimal controls, and whereas 6 has high level of controls. Okay, so you can treat the blue circle as an entity, and that entity could be either an individual or an organization. So this entity has more controls. Why? Because the color blue, number 6, it has a layers of security, and it is compliant to industry best practices, regulatory audits, and it follows their own control mechanism, like layers of security has been implemented, access has been implemented, whatever industry best practices has been implemented. When it comes to number one, it has very less level of controls. So obviously, we call it as a low-hanging fruit, and this low-hanging fruit can be accessible by even botnets. So imagine the impact, the risk impact comparing to 1 to 6. So 1 is the impact of risk is high when comparing to 6. Okay, so we might be thinking that whether since we have these many controls around the 6, I mean, for an entity 6, it could be organization or individual. So does that mean that it's fully secure? No, we can't say that. And at the same time, we can't say that it is not secure. Why? Because in a dark web, what will happen is usually 99% of hackers, I mean, skilled professionals, they would not do the research or do their work, do their job for fun or for fun or just for money. Okay, so their target is different. Their target is different. They will be approached by third parties. They'll be giving targets. They will work. Maybe in the next slide you can see. So this is how it is organized. So they will be approached by certain requirements. For one example is usually they will be approached by their competitors. Okay, so by their competitor means, for suppose I am from organization X and Y is a competitor for me. So obviously I will try to approach through this channel and give a bounty, and the hackers will do research, will take months or years. I'll target them, and then they will accomplish the target. They will accomplish the requirement. So this is how they work. And what will happen is, maybe after years pass by or months pass by, they will found either they try to exploit the existing weakness in the system, or else they will come up with a new vulnerability which was found by them. So that is how zero-day attacks or zero vulnerability will be found, and even they themselves come up with a new ransomware. So that is how the ransomware has been the new ransomwares keep coming. Okay, so once it is accomplished, they have two targets. One is they successfully reach the target, and at the same time, whatever the research or whatever they have done, they will be selling it in the dark web. Okay, and in the dark web, there are buyers, sellers, and even third-party brokers. Okay, they will buy the ransomware or the virus or whatever, which do a malicious content, and at the same time they will buy the target users also. So they will be having a list of vulnerable machines or list of vulnerable websites, vulnerable networks, even that can be sold. They will buy that information and as well as this information, and they will try to use the ransomware on vulnerable machines. Okay, so this is how the impact of threat actors on the online data. Okay, and the motive of, I already told you what is the motive of threat actor. In case even though if it is a high level hacker, And if you look at the gaming hackers, crypto hackers, or script kiddies, whatever, some will do for fun, or some will, what they will do is they will try to buy the virus content, and at the same time they will try to buy the vulnerable machines and try to exploit. Okay. So I'll take a pause here. Please let me know if you have any queries. Okay. So moving further.
We have a question now. Does gaming belong to any of this category, white hat, black hat, or grey hat?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Does gaming hacker belong
Yeah.
to any of the categories of the following categories? White hat, black hat, or grey hat?
Gaming hacker is one category.
Okay.
So whatever I mentioned here, there are, I think, 14 categories.
Okay. So I think gaming hacker is another category
Yeah.
itself.
Yes.
Usually the white hat and black hat and gray is a very high level. I mean, white hat people are usually the good kind of what we think of. Black hat people are typically their intention is to hack and do it, and gray hat is kind of a people who are falls into both categories. But those are very high level. But again, there are so many other categories which typically we don't use in a corporate world. So that is what Naveen just displayed here.
Thank you. Thank you for brief explanation about it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So moving further, I told that entity 6 has very regulated, and it has the risk level is very less. So what are the controls what they followed? So around the data, there are different layers of security can be implemented in an organization so that the data could be secure. Like defense layer 1, data security, application, mobile security, network security, operational security, cloud security, and audit and compliance. Okay. So if you have more layers, the less impact is less. Otherwise, the impact would be more. Okay. So I mentioned regulatory assessments here. So I just add 1 or 2 examples in the current situation, what is happening in the world. Starting from 2018, regulators also has come up with their own agenda. For suppose if we take in 2018, UK regulator has come up with a requirement like CWEST, where all the financial companies in that region, in the UK region, what they have to do is they themselves has to recruit a third-party vendor, where that particular vendor has to assess their network, I mean all their critical assets, and it is simple. In simple words, it is like they have to recruit a vendor and try to hack their network. So it is like they have to pay to the vendors, third-party vendors, and they have to pay to third-party vendors, and the requirement is they have to exploit the weaknesses of their network. And as a network, it could be resources, it could be a phishing attack, it could be a social engineering attack, it could be a mix of both. It could be anything, exploiting any weakness which is publicly available. So that is one of the mandatory requirement, just brought up by UK regulatory for all the financial companies which are regulated under that jurisdiction. So similarly, HKMA, Hong Kong Monitoring Authority, also brought up the same kind of requirement. They call it as ICAST, Intelligence-Led Cyber Attack Simulation Test. Even this exercise is mandatory for the financial institutions under that regulatory region. And recently, APAC, Australia, they are also coming up with the same kind of exercise, and it is still ongoing. Probably by this year end, they will ensure that all the financial institutions has to follow that kind of regulatory. So why I'm saying this is, the assessments on the regulatory controls are keep on increasing. Okay, and at the same time, the skill level also increasing. So imagine while the regulatory itself is coming this kind of exercises, and imagine the low-hanging fruits. That means people or entities or any organizations, if they are not non-compliance to any of the standards, then obviously the risk impact is high. So what we do at CSCC? So as I said, for all these threat actors, whatever they do, I said there are layers of security, right? So for all those layers of security, we do a tailored approach. We follow a tailored approach so that each entity, it could be individual or an organization, we will try to understand what are the business requirements, and based on those business requirements, we will understand the risk levels and come up with a risk-based approach. So imagine they have one of the entity have a e-commerce portal. So obviously it is sensitive. So we will categorize in such a way, and we will ensure that e-commerce portal is secure. Or else they have only public website, but they are dealing with some hospital data. So obviously privacy issues will be there. So for those privacy issues, we will do assessment based on a tailored approach based on their requirement by taking applicable controls from HIPAA and GDPR and mapping it to their business. Okay, so it is in simple. It is like a human who go for a full body checkup, right? Likewise, we do a full organization checkup based on their business, and whatever the applicable, whatever we diagnose, we do that kind of assessment based on their business model. Okay, so as I said, Chandra previously told, we also do the secure code review or secure SDLC process. So if it is a development company, obviously we would recommend instead of developing the code and then testing and then fixing, in the design phase itself, they can follow some standards. Security, they can act. We can suggest that security could be a plugin in the SDLC itself, and then obviously we'll get a secure product. Instead of making a product secure, we can reduce the time and make it a secure product. Okay, so all these are our skill sets. So we provide these kind of services based on the business model. Okay, again. So that's it from my side. So please, I will take a pause here. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Naveen. So if you guys have any questions, please post it in the question answer so that Naveen can take it up parallelly. I will just try to so let me just go ahead and quickly do a couple of things. I hope you are able to see my screen. Just say yes when you are able to see.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yeah. So quickly, this slide is a very famous slide, which is there for more than a decade now. So one of the vendor, what they have done is they just kept the defense in depth very clearly in this slide. If you see, the defense in depth starts from the perimeter security to network security to the endpoint security, and within the endpoint, there will be applications and various type of applications. It may be data, web applications, API, and many other things. And then ultimately, the web applications will be talking to the data in the backend. The data may be in the databases or file servers or maybe some third-party other servers. So if you see the defense in depth today, what has been there for many years is talking about how we can, in a logical way, we can try to secure our organization's critical assets, which are actually kept in the center and the down, and ultimately the data, ultimately the applications, and ultimately the endpoints. And then obviously the network and perimeter. But if you see in last couple of years, perimeter and network kind of, no more there, because people have started using cloud networks and people started connecting through Wi-Fi's or hotspots or VPN networks and whatnot. So typically these two kind of become a seamless layer. And now if you see what is left over in the organizations, even in the big companies to a small company to a startup, is the endpoints. People are using bunch of laptops and desktops. Maybe desktops are also not there, but laptops, and then a lot of their servers or the development machines are either hosted in one of the cloud vendor, or they may have their small data center. And then obviously applications and other things are there. And we're also slowly moving into the serverless architectures, where you only take the resources from the cloud to the need what you really have. If you want a database, you don't really take a machine and put a database unless you really need. You may simply take a Mongo API service. So the same thing also been explained here. If you see that the type of attacks, as Naveen mentioned, and I think in the last session also been clearly mentioned, the way how people get into the organizations, one of the best way for hackers to get into the organization is a phishing emails. It may be phishing, doesn't mean only to the emails. It may come to your SMSs, it may come to your social networking websites, maybe Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is, or maybe LinkedIn, or sometimes and many times even to your WhatsApp and Telegram, those kind of messages. So ultimately, these are the channels which are available to the people to interact with you. So they will use one of those mediums, the emails or the messages and all those things, and they actually deliver their initial interaction with you, and then obviously they try to do something. I'll talk about that. And they get an access to your network or your system, and then from there they try to get into your network, and then they do many other things. Obviously, once they get the foothold of your system or your network, their goal is to steal the data or encrypt the data, and then are based on the system misconfigurations or whatever it is, they also want to persist in your system for a longer duration, so that they can continuously monitor and take advantage if there is any financial related or critical privacy related or IP data is there. So what are the sectors? Pretty much the financial services sectors is definitely the big one to get hit, along with government, because that's where the money is there directly. And then a lot of ICT, manufacturing, retail, and professional services, obviously. So the criminals are no more doing any of these kind of things just for the fun. They really wanted to get some kind of a monetary benefit. So that's why they're targeting where there is a sensitive data, or more importantly, wherever the systems are important to generate the revenue to the customers, they wanted to interrupt those services. Maybe if it's a hospital, they wanted to really infect the systems with ransomware and stop the entire network so that the hospital can be halted. So obviously the business is getting impacted, so they need to go ahead and pay some money and quickly get the decryptors or whatever it is. So Naveen covered some of these things already. So this is also a layered approach in terms of what are the type of things we need to follow in different layers, starting from GRC, the governance and risk perspective, to SIM tools and perimeter security, or platform security, and endpoint and end user protection. So what I will talk is, this is my last slide. I want to talk about a very important topic. What we actually kept for today is zero trust implementation at core. So what does it really means? If you really see the defense in depth, what we've been using so far, and if you go to any big organization, work in any service industry like TCS, Infosys, Wipro, and those kind of companies, are what they typically do is they try to outsource the cybersecurity services from the company to their offshore things. They will be doing vulnerability management, patch management, SIM related work, where they'll be managing a lot of their logs and try to do some kind of threat hunting and all those stuff. But what we've seen in last 5 to 10 years especially is, even we have so many technologies, so much of money has been invested by big companies to small companies, the security is still not really guaranteed. The fact of the matter is, those tools and technologies have their own limitations in terms of what they can do. And many a times, even the organization does not know how to use the maximum extent of the features which are available in the tools. Typically, they just buy a firewall and try to configure it. They don't really go into the depth of the options available and try to fine tune it. And sometimes they create a rule and just forget about it. The same thing goes to other tools which are available. It may be SIM tool also. Every organization will go ahead and implement very expensive SIM tools like ArcSight, Curate, or whatnot. But at the end of the day, if you do not effectively configure the rules and write the rules and continuously keep ignoring the false positives and find those false negatives, the product itself really not going to be useful. So what Zero Trust, which is coming for last 2 to 3 years, people talking about is sometimes, I mean, the whole Zero Trust means it is a perimeterless security. I already talked about the perimeter and the networks are slowly going off. It's an approach that which is typically followed in IT systems and networks. The main concept behind this entire Zero Trust security is do not trust anything, always verify. It means that even the devices within your network, trusted network, you are the owner of the system. You will not be allowed to do anything unless you've been given specifically the permission to do so. So that's a Zero Trust. But majorly the Zero Trust word is being used in a network level Zero Trust segmentation. So people call it as a micro segmentation. So there are many vendors who are coming up, even Google, Microsoft, even Palo Alto, people like them are trying to invest a lot of money into this micro segmentation, where they'll be moving the perimeter firewall to the system level itself. So that means that you are no more controlling the traffic only at perimeter, because the perimeter is kind of gone now. So you are actually bringing the firewall to system level so that you can actually control the traffic at a much more granular level and only on a required basis. And let's say there is a web server, there's a database server, there's an API server, and maybe authentication server. So especially the traffic within the same network or within the same segment, there won't be typically any firewalls. So it means if somebody gets access to one of the systems in those network, they try to do a lateral movement very easily. So that's where this micro segmentation can really help, because if you implement firewall at each of these machines, so even the movement between one machine to another machine is only to the required ports and protocols. So that is what is a big business going on. But I want to talk about a couple of more Zero Trusts which are very important. The second one is a user level Zero Trust. So it doesn't mean that if you just because you're an administrator or a domain administrator or you have a super user, doesn't mean that you can go ahead and do anything what you want. You can go ahead and access anything what it is. So slowly, a lot of user level controls are coming in. That is also considered as a Zero Trust. So it is important organizations start considering implementing the Zero Trust at network level, user level, and also at a data level. So when it comes to the data level, even a lot of technologies are getting developed at implementing the Zero Trust at a data level. So example, I'll tell you. So I have a bank account in HDFC. Today, I do not know when any of the HDFC bank employees try to open my account and access my sensitive information like my address, maybe my bank balance, where the transactions are happening. Today, there is no way I come to know, because anybody can open. The same way goes to my mobile number. If somebody in the Airtel wanted to open my itemized bill and they wanted to look at where I am currently, in which tower I am talking to, they can go ahead and do it. I do not know any of those alerts. I don't get any alerts. Slowly, even the data which belongs to you, if somebody is trying to access, even the owner where the data is being residing, example HDFC Bank or Airtel people, even if they are trying to access it, you have to give the permission specifically. So some of these things are already happening in the social networking websites using a lot of GDPR policies and many other privacy things. But slowly, that is also going to get into a corporate level thing. So that's a data level. So what we have done from CSCC in last couple of years is we also implemented a Zero Trust, the first product Zero Trust implementation at core. In fact, that product got acquired by one more US company already. But what that brings a different level of security is we actually take the Zero Trust to a system level and at a kernel level. So if any process has to execute, it has to get approved. In which system, which process can be allowed also can be controlled through a centralized console. and also which process can spawn which process can actually make a network connection. It's not the network firewall is just at a system level. We also want to take the network to the process level, because Chrome making 443 outbound connections is okay, but a PowerShell making 443 TCP outbound connections is not okay, because many a times the CNC communications when the system gets compromised, they will be talking or basically get connected to the CNC controllers, the command and controller servers in the hacker network, through a reverse 443 or allowed ports at your firewall level. So it is very important which process is actually initiating connecting to which port and which protocol and all those things. So we also implemented process to hardware, which process can actually talk to your hardware USB ports, and to the level extent read-write accesses to your USB things and all those stuff. And the last thing, we also the first vendor to actually create a process to data level access controls. Which application actually can access which data in the folder or extension or a file. So all those things are there. So obviously, this has been implemented in many organizations already, in airports, e-commerce companies and hospitals. Even in Hyderabad, multiple hospitals are using our product for last more than 4+ years. We're also, we are actually implementing the solution even to a startup companies now, so that because many times what happens is startup companies have a lot of IP, because they may not have a lot of patents, but they have a lot of IP, and so they do not have that kind of idea in terms of what kind of solutions they need to buy, how much money they need to put, and they don't even know. I mean, they can't even afford to have a full-time cybersecurity person. Typically, they may have a maximum DevOps guy or DevOps person. So we actually come as a all-in-one cybersecurity consulting plus implementing all the things what is required for any company to be secure from day one. So, and also very important, at a zero trust implementation, you also need to have a single source of truth what is going on across your organization. So that typically happens through collection of the logs from networks to systems to applications to databases and authentications and all those things. So you need to have a mechanism to collect all that information and then implement a MITRE framework or a customized threat hunting and risk associated rules, so that if anything goes wrong, as things keep happening, let us say multiple login fail attempts are happening. It means somebody is trying to do a brute force attack, or somebody is trying to log in. Maybe there is a dual step authentication is there, but somebody is trying to keep on trying it through some brute forces, or maybe they got a password through some phishing attack, or maybe your data got leaked into Darkweb or deep web, somebody bought it and doing it. So you need to know what kind of things are happening across your network in a multi-cloud environment, because not just at a laptop level or a data center or a cloud. So maybe you are using a lot of services across multi-cloud environments. So you need to have that kind of a thing. So we also have a SOC service which is implemented in our own platform, which is backed up by Elastic ELK. And also it is very important, you need to start implementing backup and also replicate the failovers at different layers, at least once in quarter or once in a month. Let us say if an application goes down, or if your database goes down, or if your API goes down, or things like that, and replicate the failover mechanisms, not just from the scalability and the entire network failover mechanism, but also from the backup perspective, and see how quickly you can bring back the latest available data and do all those things. So the entire zero trust implementation at core consists of all these things: network, user, data, and a kernel level and a log level, and the last thing what I just explained about the backend and these things. So before I just end, I would like to show you, I mean, if you look at some of the ransomware attacks, I mean, obviously every ransomware attack happens through a binary. If you see in this example, there is evil.exe. Obviously it is maybe some sandbox environment, but typically it will be something like svchost.exe or maybe a chrome.exe. They try to make you believe this is some known application, whatever it is, and then obviously it will spawn multiple processes and try to impact your system. So when you have a zero trust implemented at a kernel level, so you will not be able to run this kind of applications. Doesn't matter how they're coming, either they're coming through USBs, they're coming through lateral movement, they're coming through zero-day exploits in browsers, PDFs, documents, whatnot, doesn't matter. they'll be stopped. And if you look at even the NSO zero-day exploit, which is available, that is also comes through a PDF. So they actually put the entire payload in a fake GIF, and then they actually deliver the payload. And again, I mean, if you look at the NVIDIA data breach, also if you look at it, so the entire thing happened through a malware which was actually sitting on the environment for many days and months, where it is communicating outside. So when you have a process to network and process to data level of zero trust implementation, these kind of things will get caught at immediately in the beginning itself. And even if you look at the Spring Force shell, the latest exploit, which is the widely being used, if you see it, it is also spawning a new process through the web server. So when you have a process context level zero trust implementation is done, so obviously this kind of a Log4j or a Spring Force shell or any of those kind of latest zero-day exploits and attacks available in the market will not be able to impact your organization. So I also want to just show you one or two things. If you see, this is one of the document related Trojan. You can also go to any.run and look at a lot of those things. It's a sandbox environment. If you see it, the document is actually spawning the exe. So basically the payload is actually kept within the document itself, and they may have a password to the document. And then when you open it, the payload gets dropped into your system, into temporary folder or into the memory. It gets just try to do something in your machine. The same thing. This is also one of the malware. It's again the Winword actually spawning one more process, and then the thing comes and impacts your system. And again, here if you see Excel also, when you open when people you get an Excel sheet from some third-party people, you blindly open it. Sometimes you even enable your macros because you typically think that Excel does require a lot of macros. But in that macro, they can also spawn very interesting PowerShell obfuscated payload stage 1, and then they subsequently bring the binary either within the memory itself, or they just touch the disk and try to run it, and then maybe they get access to your system and they put it a persistence, or they may even make your entire system gets infected. So if you look at the whole thing about all this type of attacks what are available in the market, you need a robust zero trust implementation is required in your organization. So I don't want to go too much into this thing, but I just quickly show you example. This is one of the systems which got protected by zero trust. So I'll quickly show you. Suppose if I open the command prompt and type PowerShell, it gets spawned, no problem. But the same command prompt, if I open the Chrome browser and try to run the same command prompt, the Chrome browser, and type PowerShell, it gets denied. So this kind of zero trust is required, a process contextual blocking. You don't need to even identify these kind of things. It has to be a complete protective mechanisms. And the last thing I want to show you is, let us say, okay, let me just show you. If I just try to bring any new binary into the system, maybe malware or some kind of a exe, it should not run. At the same time, all my other applications should work without any problem. So you need, because of lack of time, I don't want to go into too much of these things. But if you really implement the right zero trust, starting from kernel to the user space, and then data layer, network layer, and then bringing all the things back into one single console, basically kind of a customized XDR platform, and do a live threat hunting, I think you will be able to, you don't have to guess security anymore. You will be very much predictable because you have taken the zero trust in a very different way and actually implemented it, and you are controlling it, and you are actually moving slowly back to the proactive mode than the detective or a responsive mode, which is typically available in defense in depth. So I think with this, I would like to stop my talk here. But if you have any questions in terms of what are the different type of services we provide, please go to cscclabs.com. And if you need any help for your organization or your friends organization or the companies whom you know, or maybe your startup, we are happy to provide end-to-end comprehensive cybersecurity solutions from CSCC Labs, which is incubated in DSCI. So we would like to thank Dr. Sriram and the entire team for supporting us for the last couple of years during the pandemic, and providing these kind of opportunities to interact with people like you and team, so that we can. I mean, obviously there are a lot many other things I want to show, but because of lack of the time, this is one of our product which we implemented, releasing tomorrow. It's Unified Endpoint Manager. It's again a product which is developed completely by us from scratch, and which will be released to market tomorrow. So with this, I'm done, and thanks a lot.
Thank you, Chandra Garu. Thank you, Naveen Garu, for taking your time out and telling us more about CSCC Labs and Zero Trust implementation. Thank you so much again for an insightful and a wonderful session. Thank you. And